ลำดับต่อไปนะคะดิฉันขอเชิญทุกท่านนะคะเข้าร่วมสู่ในหัวข้อที่6นะคะการเงินและความหลากหลายทางชีวภาพในภูมิภาคเอเชียและนานาชาตินะคะซึ่งในส่วนนี้ดิฉันได้รับเกียรตินะคะมีผู้ร่วมดำเนินรายการกับดิฉันนะคะก็คือคุณจิรนุชศักดิ์คำดวงนะคะจากสถาบันสิ่งแวดล้อมไทยนะคะจะเป็นผู้ดำเนินรายการขอเสียงปรบมือต้อนรับคุณจิรนุชด้วยค่ะนอกจากนี้แล้วนะคะยังมีแขกผู้มีเกียรติที่ร่วมกับ panelist ในตรงนี้นะคะมิมขออนุญาตเรียนเชิญแขกทีละท่านขึ้นสู่บนเวทีค่ะคุณโอลิเวอร์นะคะออร์กอนซิลเวอร์ผู้อำนวยการฝ่ายความหลากหลายทางชีวภาพศูนย์ความหลากหลายทางชีวภาพอาเซียนค่ะลำดับต่อมานะคะคุณอานุชเมธานะคะผู้อำนวยการธนาคารพัฒนาเอเชียแห่งประเทศไทยค่ะหรือ ADB ค่ะลำดับถัดไปนะคะดรดินโดแคมปิสันนะคะผู้อำนวยการจาก IUCN ประจำภูมิภาคเอเชียค่ะและสุดท้ายนะคะนางสาวซูบาศิวกุมารันนะคะหัวหน้าแผนกการเงินเพื่อการพัฒนาฝ่ายนโยบายเศรษฐกิจมหภาคและการเงินเพื่อการพัฒนาคณะกรรมการเศรษฐกิจและสังคมแห่งเอเชียแปซิฟิก ASCAP ค่ะขอเสียงปรบมือให้กับแขกผู้มีเกียรติของเราอีกครั้งหนึ่งค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ
Thanks, Ms. MC. Welcome back to the sixth session. I think it's quite challenge because we are under pressure. We were asked to shorten our session. Unfortunately, we couldn't. We will try. I'm sure everyone already become energetic from coffee break. We will change our order of speaker a little bit. Okay. Yes, sure, of course. The first speaker will be delivered by Dr. Dindo Kampiland. He will be the first to speak and will be the first to leave as well because he needs to catch his flight. Okay, before no further ado, Dr. Dindo.
Hello. Yes, I really have to start with an apology because I thought the original session is going to finish before 4. As you know, many things are happening this week, last week, next week. This week is also the Asia Pacific Ministerial Forum on Agriculture in Colombo. That's why I have to run to Don Muang to fly tonight. So apologies, but I'll stay for as long as I could. Thank you very much. I would have preferred to speak after Anuj and Akhil Oliver because much of what I'm going to share builds on the partnership we have with with ACB and also with ADB. But nonetheless, let me just go ahead and present some of the slides. I'm going to make a presentation, and so if I don't have time for question and answers, Anuj and Oliver will answer. First of all, I'd like to thank AFD and also TAI for inviting us, IUCN. Government of Thailand, of course, being one of the pioneering state members of IUCN. AFD, because much of what I'm going to share today builds on the work that we do with AFD and France, particularly around nature-based solutions. And TAI is also a member organization for coming today. It's also good that I was here since this morning because there were 2 points that dawned on me. While the organizer said they want me to speak about concrete examples of business engagement, there were 2 points that I now would like to start with. It was very useful for me to listen and to appreciate the diversity and the richness of experience we have already around finance. And that to me is very important for all of us to appreciate and also to understand that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. At the same time, there was something that really struck me because this forum is about finance for biodiversity. And I say biodiversity because somehow you may have noticed the many examples you've heard talk about biodiversity, nature, climate, circular economy, what else we talk about, green. Now, if biodiversity is the impact target at the end, finance is the intermediate means to it, we must be clear then, what is this ultimate target, the impact target we have, which is biodiversity. I say that because finance for biodiversity somehow is distinct from finance for climate, or finance for circular economy, or finance for green business. And so I would make the key message that while these are all interrelated, since we talk about finance for biodiversity, let us focus on that because there are subtle differences, but they also make a lot of difference. While also saying that it's important to recognize their interlinkages. We know now, global science has told us, climate and biodiversity are two sides of the same coin. And the examples in finance in these other environmental challenges are important basis for us to curate specific financial instruments and tools for biodiversity. But first, we must know what we are financing before we talk about biodiversity and biodiversity outcomes. Okay, for those of you unfamiliar with IUCN, just a slide to introduce ourselves. The three probably relevant items I'd like to emphasize on who we are. So we are intergovernmental. So Thailand, one of our pioneering state members. France, of course. France hosted our 75th anniversary celebration in Fontainebleau, where it all began 75 years ago. But what really makes us unique, and the IUCN voice and the IUCN position, it's not just the position of the governments of the world, because as a union, it includes membership, for example, of NGOs, okay, the familiar ones like WWF, but we also have subnational governments, cities and provinces, and we have indigenous peoples as members, as part of a governance. They're not just groups that we serve or beneficiaries. They're part of guides us, and that makes us a very unique platform for bringing these diverse voices in terms of what we offer to the world's conservation community. The other one, of course, is a lot of people say, you see on your red list. Yes, it's true, but it's more than that. We are known for many of the global standards that we have, including the red list for species. And that's one function that we play, including for this forum today. Third one is we connect what we do on the ground or we do in the countries with what's happening globally because of our specific role in relation to environmental agreements, not only the big three, climate, biodiversity, and sustainable land health, but also among the more specific ones. See, last week in Samarkand, we just had a COP on migratory species, Ramsar, and in Thailand, we're also known for our role with, in relation to the Convention for Natural World Heritage Site with UNESCO. So all of this makes IUCN quite broad, but today I want to speak more specifically about our role in biodiversity and how we partner with the financial community. I'll approach this from a broader framework of business engagement. We have a long history of partnering with the business sector, whether it's within Thailand or globally. The graph that is presented there shows the diversity of sectors that we engage with across different countries. And it's not even updated, I think, for 2024. So we do have that strong, very diverse, solid experience of working with the private sector. But I think it's more important to understand how we approach it. When we say business engagement for biodiversity conservation, we actually engage with three entry points. We think about a company in three ways. And I think most of the examples today also related to that. There's the company that looks at philanthropic grant for biodiversity and the public good, putting out money for charity or for support to a global challenge, maybe unrelated to the business that they're doing. Many of us in the nonprofit sector, we receive funding for those. Then there is mainstreaming biodiversity tools in business. So it's about business engagement, which takes advantage of available tools, available standards from IUCN and others, which is to improve greening the supply chains, improving the circularity, and maybe adding value to the business operation. So that's very different from just philanthropy. The third one, of course, which is the focus of this session, is mobilizing private sector biodiversity financing. So when we speak to a company or to a group of companies, we usually start with that. What's going to be our relationship like? Are you here giving us money to do marine plastic project somewhere in Thailand? Are you here because you want us to integrate some of our IUCN tools into your business operations? Or are you here because you want advice around investment or finance? And I'll start with a very concrete example. Sorry. Next slide. Yes. Toyota and Toyota Thailand. to illustrate what we mean here. So Toyota Thailand started a partnership with the Red List. As part of its CSR and philanthropic objective, said we want to contribute to the world's red listing process by providing philanthropic money and grant to support IUCN in developing the global standard for the red list. But then here in Thailand, we also engage with them. If you're familiar with the plant which is near Suvarnabhumi, they're interested to transform that plant area of I don't know how many rise, including the greening of its landscape, which we now have as an eco-forest. So it's about a company and a company's mission and contributing to its own sustainability targets. And then with Thailand and a group of companies here, it also led the formation of the first Business for Biodiversity platform to influence investments by a group of companies. And I must thank Vivi because she really started this when she was with IUCN. So for companies in this room today, we at IUCN start with this conversation because it's easy to get this all mixed up. But for us, it's also important, what is the nature of engagement that we're going to have? Is it one of the circles? Is it two? Is it three? Because it also helps us determine, is there something we can offer as IUCN? Next slide. So we'll go through each of the circles. Start the first one. This is very typical. As you can see, we work on different environment, nature-related projects. You have there examples in Sri Lanka and in Vietnam. I'd like to highlight the green one at the end, because it's a blend of the first and the second circle. And this is with Huawei and Esri. It's also about using digital innovation. So using the advances and the innovation of companies like Huawei and Esri, if we do a lot of GIS work, in our work on protected and conserved areas. So there are several of these examples, probably over 50 companies we work with just in Asia. But this is one area of how we as IUCN support the private sector. The other one, which is the second circle, is really about mainstreaming biodiversity tools in business. And many organizations, many consulting firms can do this. So what sets us apart? We only do this type of work if there's interest from a company to harmonize corporate or industry standards with global standards. So what we offer is, if a company wants to harmonize its own targets, its own sustainability agenda with what happens globally in terms of standards, then we come in. And you have there examples that we have in Pakistan and in Vietnam, Cambodia, and in China. China is the most interesting one because it also relates to fintech. In Thailand, if you're a fan of buying from Lazada, so that's the equivalent that we have in China with Alipay and with the Ant Group. The third one is, of course, mobilizing private sector financing. Well, we heard about small grants, and we do a lot of re-granting schemes around the region. We believe that it takes more than just drops of money to make significant change. So we do have a role in multilateral financing. We work with countries to support accessing money from GCF or in JEF. But in addition, I put there two examples. One is around Subnational Climate Fund, because much of the money is usually sovereign. It goes to countries and national governments. There's much less available that goes to entities below national level, cities, provinces, or private sector. Another one that's more specific is in the Low Carbon Accelerator Fund. And of course, Anuj is going to talk about the ADB, Nature Solutions Finance Hub, which we launched in Dubai just about 2 months ago. So in summary, what could we offer and contribute to a partnership with you? There are essentially 6 key areas. And this comes back to global standards. So as an organization that helps set global standards and promote it, nature-based solution, the current one, and that's thanks to AFD again. There's Green List, which is the Green List for protected and conserved areas. Last week, we had a meeting with DMCR. Thailand wants to have its first site green listed, which is going to be marine. There's the databases and tools. What is so significant about IUCN as an organization founded on the science of conservation and biodiversity? Because we manage, and we promote the largest, the most diverse databases and tools which actually become the reference for many other organizations to build on. So we heard so many examples from this morning, and many of them were, for example, based on KBA, key biodiversity areas. That's a global reference to target specific areas where you want to invest. You talk about, we have a new red list. It's not just the red list for species. There's now a red list of ecosystems, which provide the typology of ecosystems, and which is, again, the reference for the world in terms of designing projects and also targeting. I go to knowledge and capacity building. We have the IUCN Academy. I said there are many other organizations that provide training capacity building. Our IUCN Academy provides professional certification. You can be trained in NBS anywhere you want. If you want a professional certificate, a nature-based solution, and put it in your business card, you come to the IUCN Academy. There's Panorama, which is an online platform on various solutions in nature and biodiversity. Then we have practical guidance. It's interesting, again, to note many of the examples we heard since this morning, because these are somehow linked to or built on what we also produce at IUCN as different tools, guidance, and guide sheet. Two examples I put there because it relates, again, to business and finance. International policy engagement is a very important part of what we do, and this is making sure that what we do on the ground connects to the national priorities and targets and also to what's going on happening. So Ramsar on wetlands, and that's our engagement with the East Asia flyways. There's the work that we do on many of the other conventions in the environment that we connect. We have been involved for the new Global Biodiversity Framework. By the time countries were planning on the stand, negotiating in Montreal, and then now we're all asking, now what? The world has signed up for 30 by 30. How on earth are we going to achieve these targets in Thailand, or Bhutan, or in Singapore? So this is the role that we play. ONEP has been a key partner for us here, which also reminds me, because many of the examples just earlier were about marine and what we do on coastal. So as you know, last year the world finally commonly adopted the new treaty on marine biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. We really work hard to influence countries to do that. In September, I think 90 countries have already signed. Unfortunately, today, no single country has ratified except Palau. So part of what we do is talking to different countries, including Thailand, to make sure that this landmark treaty that's been adopted is going to be, we need more than at least 60 countries to ratify it so that it becomes legally binding as a treaty and as a world contract for us to preserve marine biodiversity outside of our national borders. And then, of course, our experts commission. Why do we say we have this global expertise and we have this largest network? So we have this over 15,000 experts in various commissions. And I was just looking at the list before I came here. In Asia, there are about 4,000 of these members. Thailand is only 100. There's a lot of potential for specialists like you to engage with us and to become part of these commissions. Then convenings. As you know, we also organize. Part of our role is to convene the world, to convene various sectors, to discuss specific issues and challenges. So the Global Leaders Forum that we organize every year specifically focuses on what the business sector and the private sector can do, can work with. Now everybody talks about nature positive. It's again becoming a jargon that everybody just wants to use. So what is nature positive? What is net biodiversity gain? What is neutrality, carbon neutrality? And many years earlier, we only talked about mitigating the negative consequences.
Dr. Dinto, sorry to interrupt, but you might miss your flight.
Oh, yes. So, and this is my last slide. So in September, we welcome you very much to join us. Every 4 years, we organize the Regional Conservation Forum en route to our global Congress, which happens in 2025. So please do connect with us. If you're interested, this is the broader platform what we have today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you you very much for being with us today, and we are very sorry to see you leave. Okay, you stay. Okay, good. Okay, what Dr. Dindo just shared with us is very interesting and very important, especially for private sector who is asking about what should we do, what is the standard to measure biodiversity if we change to biodiversity positive or nature positive business. But I think there's still a lot to talking about. Next, I would like to invite my next speaker. I think for someone who really wait for the initiative, I think Mr. Oliver Agoncillo can give us a very insightful of Asian Business and Biodiversity Initiative, or ABBI. Please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Janet. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us here and to share with us, to share with you the ASEAN Business Biodiversity Initiative, which is really a beginning of initiative between the business sector and the private and the biodiversity sector. So we have heard about the situation since this morning. What I would like to highlight here is the Stockholm Resiliency Center, another study that they said they breached nine boundaries. We breached 6 already on the interplanetary boundaries. That's important for us to recognize that the urgency of the situation and how do you mitigate the problem. And also from the World Economic Forum, you can see the study in 2022, a survey that 3 of the 10 global risk is really related to environment and biodiversity and climate change. So again, we have talked about this since this morning. The photos are some examples in the Southeast Asia region. So these are the grim reminders. But at the same time, I would like to draw your attention on how unique our biodiversity and natural resources are. Despite the area that we have, we only have 3% of the world's surface area, but we have 25% of all known plants and animals, and 37% of these, around 19,000 species, are found only in the Southeast Asia region. So let me introduce to you the center. We are supporting the ASEAN member states in furthering the agenda for biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. We work under the ASEAN Working Group on Nature and Conservation of Biodiversity under the Socio-Cultural Division. And there are other divisions in the ASEAN level. So ACB is one working with our governing board are practically the ministries of the 10 ASEAN countries in the environment. Of course, ONEP is one of our active members. So here, we've heard about this since this morning, about the KMGBF, or the Biodiversity Plan, but I would like to draw your attention in terms of the comprehensive recovery framework that was implemented during the COVID times. It recognizes the importance of nature and natural resources in order to build the resiliency in the region. And we also would like to draw your attention in the RCEP, which is, championed by the other division, the economic division. And one of the articles there is really the rights and responsibilities of the ASEAN member states under the Convention on Biodiversity. In here, again, in last December, all ASEAN member states have committed more so in terms of targets in the Community Montreal, and specific for the private sector is really target 14, talks about the whole of society approach, and we heard about this since this morning on the importance of different stakeholders to push forward on how do we mainstream biodiversity in all of the sectors in society and to meet the targets. And also there's a target out of the 23 on target 15, we talks about disclosure and reporting, and we heard about some tools already in the pipeline and those working in the different sectors. And of course, looking at subsidies, how do we, the negative subsidies and how to increase the incentives for positive subsidies. So the ASEAN Center have partnered with the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, which is the APEC body and the ASEAN Economic Community, to one of the 5 priorities of the ABAC, ASEAN BAC, is really looking at on sustainable development, health resilience, and food security, which are really talks about healthy ecosystems and biodiversity. So last year, September, during the ASEAN Business Summit, we signed a partnership agreement, 3-year partnership agreement, with the overall goal of contributing to the ASEAN towards a greener and sustainable future through mainstreaming biodiversity and nature-based solution in the strategic priorities of the business sector in the region. So some of the major objectives for the partnership is to how do we facilitate cooperation? How do we contribute towards building sustainable economy by looking at capacity buildings for micro, small and medium enterprises? And of course, how do we encourage investments for biodiversity mainstreaming and NBS through communication, education, and public awareness, sharing best practices as we have here, and of course, how do we incorporate, again, the practicality of mainstreaming biodiversity. So here, again, we are in the process of joint work programming. We have doing a lot of consultation with stakeholders, identifying challenges and opportunities, and of course, outreach awareness and raising and learning. So recently in January, we presented the ABBI to the Joint Business Council, which is now headed by the Lao Chamber. So some of the examples of emerging collaboration and partnership, and I'm very glad to hear the role of IUCN, and of course, how do we, this mapping exercises and consultations with other groups in the region is very important for us. So on your screen are some of the partners, potential partners that we've talked with in terms of their strengths, capacity building, knowledge exchange, policy regulatory synergy, financing incentives, and monitoring and evaluation. So again, what are the potential transformative strategies when we focus on micro and small medium enterprises? So we see that there are 3 stages: deepening the understanding of biodiversity, nature-based solution, and National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan, and the drive for business action plans, of having business and biodiversity as an action plan, and then expand the reach. So you see the first year would be on what's the idea of a biodiversity business hub looks like in the region. So having heard about different actors and different movements already, we don't want to compete, but we would like to complement and have this platform to be to gather these different groups. For example, in terms of awareness toolkits, we have heard a lot of toolkits, and this is the opportunity for us to identify which one would work. And also, in lastly, in terms of carbon market development, there's a lot of interest in the region in terms of ecosystem restoration, and then this could be a possible path forward in terms of business and biodiversity initiative in the region. So the rest are really, we're open for more discussions and to hear more about the current efforts that we would like to scale up the region. So of course, we invite you to the ABBI journey, and we look forward to more conversations later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Great presentation. Okay. You look at the time stopper. Okay. Okay, it's very good to know that ABBI is going to focus on small and medium enterprise business, because this morning the business sector I think someone from Global Compact Network, they mentioned that why we just focus on the big company, the large company who has already enough resource to do and study their impact on nature and biodiversity. But your initiative will be very much welcome for the small and medium enterprise. And you also mentioned about nature-based solution, which is really linked to our next speaker. I would like to invite Mr. Anush Mehta, who is the country director of Thailand Resident Mission of the ASEAN Development Bank. He's going to tell us the Nature Solution Finance Hub NSFS for Asia and the Pacific. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Maybe at the outset, firstly, thank you very much to AFD for organizing this and such an important issue. I have a lot of slides, but I'm just going to go through and sort of try to labor just on 5 or 6 key points. Firstly, this was the reason we are meeting is because we launched a Nature Solutions Finance Hub in Dubai at COP last year, just a couple of months ago. And it's important because I think the first key point to remember is there is no battle for climate change if we lose the battle for nature. They're inextricably linked, and that's why we launched it at COP, which is normally more famous for discussions on climate. But a lot of discussions in Dubai were about nature and how do we protect our water, land-based forests, etc., species, which are the sinks for carbon. This is one of ADB's first initiatives focused on nature. And it's nature finance. That's the second point, that how do we crowd in money into the fight for nature? I think that's the critical aspect, which I'll talk about in a second. I won't necessarily go into all the tipping points, but I think it's been well pointed out that Asia, especially Southeast Asia, ASEAN, is a huge biodiversity rich area and also a biodiversity hotspot where there is a huge amount of losses which are happening. So I think forest cover, we say 15% of the forest cover has gone. A lot of the species are under threat. Number of coastal areas are seeing the depletion of fish stocks. You heard some of the examples on plastics earlier. So, the issue of the loss of our environment is super pressing, especially in this part of the world. Third point, which sort of is worth taking away, is money, in the sense that we know that environment is important for climate. We know that the environment is under massive threat. But how do you combat it with nature-based solutions, which is the technical design for combating or developing projects? And the issue is the money. And if you look over there, you need 711 billion. This is one of the estimates per year to reverse global biodiversity losses. That is a massive amount of money. And if you look at all the different requirements for infrastructure and social development, this is another number. So how do we get this kind of money in? And that's why the issue of nature-based solutions is not about individual projects, however important they are. It is about scale and time, because we don't have much of these left. How quickly can we get in a lot of money into fighting projects, and where is it going to come from? So the reason why we set up the Nature Hub is basically that. It is to create those nature-based solution projects which everybody should be doing, so replicable nature-based solution projects, but also especially number 2, which is the innovative finance instruments that can crowd in money from different sources to make these projects bankable, attractive, and scaled up. So always 2 things, nature as well as innovative finance. We've put in a number here which is to catalyze at least 5 billion by 2030 from public and private sources into nature-based solutions. And that is, I would say, still a very small amount of funding that is required. But it's already, sort of an ambitious task. What are we trying to do? So, you'll see the usual stuff, which is capacity building, very important. Development of knowledge, very important. But it's really these 2 things which are critical, which is incubate projects. So step back for a second. Climate infrastructure, much easier to understand. We're trying to develop transport projects, metro rail, even water supply, etc. Much easier to understand because we're building a water treatment plant. But how do you develop in nature-based solutions? Right now in Bangkok, for example, there's a big project happening on floods, right? So how do you support the Lower East Chao Phraya from flooding, right? So raising the embankments, etc. Can you apply nature-based solutions over there? How do you apply it? What is the technical design? That is what we're saying in terms of incubating technical designs for better development of nature-based designs for projects, coastal protection. Mangroves is the easiest example for coastal protection. So that's a nature-based solutions design. Can we do it across the board? So incubation, where we put a lot of grant money for developing projects all over Asia Pacific is one part. And the second is de-risking, a word that you should hear more and more and more from us if you're successful in implementing a nature-based solutions hub. And that simply says that if you're trying to crowd in the 711 billion that you need per year into nature-based solutions, government money, and I don't mean Thailand, I mean all governments, how can they use their limited funds, the ADB, World Bank, JICA, how can we use the limited money available to not finance an asset, not to build a plant or a road or a water supply project, but to reduce the risk of that project so that others can finance it, de-risking. So can I basically say, for a mangrove restoration project, use ADB money to guarantee every year that the cost of operating that project can be met? If we can guarantee the annual cost requirement for that project, then maybe the private sector can come in and put in money upfront to build the project. So de-risking, because otherwise you will not get the private capital to come in. So there are 5 activity areas over here, which is including the blue box, the de-risking fund, to try and make this happen. What are the priority sectors? So, it's also a very big area. So, what we've tried to do is basically look at how we can prioritize the focus of the Nature Hub. So we said food security and agribusiness, sustainable forestry, water sanitation, coastal protection, and then cross-cutting. Now, this is a very wide spectrum, and what I'm hoping with the help of our friends at IUCN especially, is that we create over the next few months a framework for choosing the most impactful projects. Whether you call it a taxonomy or a framework, we need to bring nature down to a very clear framework of saying, yes, this project in Thailand has the greatest impact on nature. Nature and climate. So there will be 2 indicators for every project that is supported, environmental impacts as well as climate impacts. That is a framework that we are trying to develop. I also understand, for example, some of the UN agencies are developing it. We will try and align so that there is one framework that we develop under this. I won't get into this too much, but eventually what you want to see from the Nature Hub is actually this. What finance products are going to catalyze private capital in? You'll hear a lot of discussions about nature bonds. So how do we make a government or an SOE issue a nature bond? Is the money that is raised from a nature bond actually commercially useful for a entity trying to do a fisheries project or a water pollution project on plastics that some of the earlier people spoke about? It may not, because the money coming from a bond is still expensive. But can an ADB or a World Bank reduce the cost of that bond when the government issues a bond so that the end user gets a much cheaper cost of funding? Maybe. There are examples which have been done in Uruguay, for example, and so on, which we are trying to adapt. So one of the big issues over here will be, can we scale up the number of bonds? The second will be, can we provide a lot of money, what they call blended finance for upstream financing of projects? And then maybe the only other one to point out is biodiversity credits. Super interesting area to think about, because in normal infrastructure financing, you're basically saying, what can we do to improve your revenue streams? Over here, what we're saying on biodiversity credits is, can we give funding for a project which reduces the loss of environment by doing that project? So by reducing the loss of fisheries, if that's happening and you can measure it annually, can the ADB through the hub provide some sort of a financial incentive to that project. So incentives to reduce the loss of environment. That's sort of an idea of a biodiversity credit. It's not the same as a carbon credit, which is a tradable credit. We are talking slightly differently here. So number of instruments to develop. I only mentioned the global biodiversity framework, which was adopted at Kunming, because we are trying to see whether we can eventually align the work of the Nature Hub to many of these targets. And you can see that the targets are pretty good, right? 30% conservation of land and of degraded ecosystems. But what does it mean at a project level? Pretty complicated in each country. And therefore, we are trying to say, we see the high-level standards. We want to use money to develop projects at a country level. That's the aim of the hub. I won't get into what I've sort of mentioned quickly, which is on the financial products. It's worth mentioning about the TA funds. So this is available right now, though technically we start implementing only in April. But we've already started getting requests from governments all over Asia Pacific. It's not just Southeast Asia, it's Asia Pacific, for help in developing projects and instruments. So we've already started working on initial scoping out of nature bonds. We've already started working on the development of some of the initial projects on coastal protection, peatlands, water pollution, etc. So the grant money is available to develop the nature projects under the hub. A quick word on the partners. So we launched it with, the Nature Hub was launched in Dubai with both finance partners and technical partners. So of course, finance partners, the AFD, OPEC Fund, ASEAN Catalytic Green Facility, and Saudi. And our technical partners led by IUCN, Nature Finance, Nature Conservancy, TNC, UNDP, and WWF. So the point is to try and bring together the technical know-how, the financial know-how into just one thing. Develop innovatively financed nature projects for the countries that want help. That's the idea. I won't go into the individual numbers, but we've got around $1 billion worth of financing commitments to co-finance projects and roughly about $10 to $15 million worth of grant money to try and develop projects. So I hope that this sort of bears fruit as we go along. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. It's very impressive. And I think a lot of people who work on nature-based solutions, like myself, is trying to think, how can we be a part of this financial support or assistance? But first, I think we need to understand the banker language, the financial language is kind of out of our, maybe it's a kind of technical assistant. Teach us, please. And now we come to our final speaker, Ms. Tabu from UNESCAP. She is going to share us with the call for, a call for action on regional biodiversity finance. Yes, please.
Thank you. And thank you again to Agence Française de Développement for inviting us. And maybe just to reflect as well on my previous panelist contribution, let me just start with who we are. So the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, ESCAP, many of you in Thailand may know us. We've been here for 75 years. You probably don't know what we do, and especially in this area, so I'll just quickly go through it. First of all, we provide a forum for 53 member states. So from Bangkok, we cover member states from Turkey to Vanuatu, covering the Pacific as well, which is very relevant today for our biodiversity sinks. We also ensure regional cooperation. We also provide technical assistance directly to member states based on their demand. So, for example, we're working with member state ministries of finance and central banks on debt for nature swaps, on green bond and sustainability linked bond frameworks, on project pipelines, both for nature as well as for climate, and also in the area of the energy transition, which is not so relevant here, but very relevant for Asia Pacific. And then we finally also do research as well. And I might add that all of this goes into advocating. With the research, with the experiences from our member states, we are trying to call to action our member states to become more concrete and more clear, especially with their regulators and with their ministries of finance, on how exactly we're going to fill the financing gap. Today we're speaking about nature, but the UN's focus is on all SDGs. So I'm sure many of you know this. The work that we have begun last year is on focusing on nature-based solutions, and in that we include forestry practices, wetland-related practices, restorative agriculture, and ocean-based practices. Maybe one thing to say is that traditionally and for the most part, the way that our member states, the way that ministries of finance or regulators think about it is that this has all belonged in the public domain for decades, and now we're starting to see a shift in thinking, well, how are we going to finance the gap, and therefore what do we need to do with our financing frameworks in order to meet that? As we know, the current status of nature-based solutions is insufficient to absorb all excess greenhouse gas emissions. We need a greater investment in especially terrestrial and marine NBS, and there is a strong demand for nature-based solutions in the Asia-Pacific region. I would caveat this by saying that we know that over 30% of all nature-based credits issued globally have come from the APAC region. However, if you think about it, Asia-Pacific is home to 60% of the world's population, and it contributes 70% of global economic growth. So for nature-based solution credits to only be 30% of the total shows a little bit also what we've been experiencing, that Asia-Pacific is lagging behind when it comes to having fit-for-purpose financing. Oh, sorry, one second. And I think Anuj spoke a little bit about this. We have a rough gap here. We know that finance flows must almost triple from our current levels by 2030 and quadruple by 2050. Governments continue to lead this, so they have provided 80% of total NBS finance flows. But at the same time, this is a fraction of what they were financing of something that was environmentally harmful. So again, we see this emerging debate about how public finance needs to be reallocated. And that is difficult because that is political. That requires electorates, that requires behavioral change, and that requires transformation. The same for private finance. Private finance for nature-based solutions is about 18% of total finance flows, which is already a lot higher than it was before. But it is less than 1% of other private finance flows that have a direct harmful impact on environment. So while it's wonderful to see the huge strides that private sector has made in financing nature, the truth is most of that is still quite harmful and contributing to this gap. We, as I mentioned, we have begun last year a work in this area, and we have a new project here, which working directly with member states on nature-based solutions governance, as well as therefore finance and sort of trade. And I'll get back to the governance issues a little bit when we start to talk about challenges in nature-based finance. So I know a lot of our discussion so far has really focused on what people have been doing in nature-based solutions. But I wanted to focus a little bit on the challenges that we're seeing to date. So, for example, in our early project in the Pacific Islands, we see projects, especially with payment for ecosystem services, being started. They're supposed to be linked up to carbon credit markets. There's a whole host of good intentions, behind them. However, safeguards are not yet in place. Benefit sharing is not clearly outlined. Integrating traditional communities and practices is not there, which is a particular issue when you have land tenure and customary land issues. The policy environment is missing. Valuing ecosystems, and there's a whole range of methods on valuation of on valuing ecosystems, and we're currently only using sometimes one or two, but we haven't quite yet figured out how to do that because the data and the tracking is not yet there to underpin robust valuation systems. And we're locking up assets for 20 years, so it kind of matters. Gender inclusion goes without saying, and of course the land and carbon rights as well. So these are complex perspectives and complex ecosystems. Thank you, Anuj. All my papers are. I guess what we're saying is this complexity also requires, I hesitate to use the word analytical framework, but it requires everybody to start thinking about how to do this. Because the difference with nature and climate is that it's different for every country as opposed to one carbon price. And for example, we are starting to see that biodiversity risk is being integrated into corporate decision making. But we haven't yet seen that there's a reallocation of financing at the scale required at the corporate level from harmful practices to non-harmful practices. We know that some financial asset managers are divesting away from deforestation, away from, say, palm oil, etc. But it hasn't been accompanied by moving large amounts of capital into traditionally, sort of ocean restoration, etc. And I think the final thing that obviously everyone's spoken about it, is the strengthening of the standards and regulatory frameworks that are obviously needed. We have, of course, disclosure frameworks that are coming out. If you've seen how long it's taken on TFCD, on climate-related disclosures to get this far, nature is going to be, 100 times more difficult. But that requires, grappling with. And then, finally, we've got to figure out as well how we allocate who pays for it. Really because I think, growth traditionally has relied on extracting nature-based assets, but we still need to grow, especially in Asia. That's the basis of how people get elected, but also have jobs, etc. But we also need to create a level playing field, because otherwise the danger is, especially as we look across the region, companies or finance flows to wherever something is not as expensive or not as high integrity or is not as strong. So that also needs to change. And then I think this is, I think I will conclude with that. As a call to action, we're still working out exactly what the principles are, and we're being driven by our member states. But here we want to do that for Asia Pacific out of ESCA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Subha, for sharing with us what the UN ESCAPE has been doing, and also share with us a challenge. I understand that it's different from country to country, but we need to think what is the suitable context or suitable measure for Thailand to do it, to achieve what we aim for. I think, thank you so much for our speaker to keep in time, and I would hand over the microphone to Ms. MC. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Please give them the big hand, please. I think it's very fruitful discussion and very interesting.